That's me. My name's Riaan, for those of you who haven't met me. And when you see my name and things like climbing head game and degree titles that are unpronounceable unless you've done those degrees, I think it's a valid question that sometimes people ask, okay, who's this guy, right? What does he do and why is he going to talk to us about head game? And a few of you will know the answer to what I do for a living, but I do, just all jokes apart, spend a minute a little bit on my seat, as in, what am I qualified in? And why am I standing here telling you how you should think about climbing, right? So I was lucky enough to study for 5 years in a lovely Western Cape University. Because it was Western Cape University, for 5 years, I climbed my brains out. It was amazing, right? All over the Western Cape and eventually internationally, which was super cool. But luckily, because my then girlfriend and now wife types incredibly fast, I managed to pass a couple of degrees as well, which is lovely. Obviously, these photos were taken last week Tuesday, as you can all tell. Right? That's still exactly how I look. Anyway, so academically, I have a degree in sports science, a BSc in sports science. That has majors like human physiology. There's majors like nutrition, biochemistry, and sports science as a title major. Okay, so that makes me a physiologist. Then I did an honors degree focused on peak performance within sports science, and a lot of my research in that year, all the research that I could do in that year was focused on climbing, because I'm a climber. So the cyclists were doing research on cycling, and the swimmers were doing research on swimming, and I obviously did research in climbing. So if anyone would like to know the biomechanics of a dyno, I'm your guy. I think I'm the first person to research it globally, which was fun, right? So that's what basically I qualified. Then my wife and I moved to the UK, where all the houses look exactly like that, and everyone is that pale. Where I rock climbed my brains out for 5 years. It was wonderful. So then I got to climb all throughout Europe and all throughout the UK, which was lovely. But in and amongst that, I also developed a career working as a wellness physiologist, which is what I do now. So basically I work in corporate companies and I do wellness programs in order to keep staff healthy. Okay. So in that first presentation, common beliefs that were holding climbers back was climber body type and finger strength. It's all about these two things. If you're too short or you're too tall or you're too this or you're too that, then you can't be a good climber, and finger strength is all that you want to train. Well, turns out if we just zoom in very quickly on body type, just to recap there, that is a gentleman by the name of? Chris Sharma, yes. And Chris Sharma, hold on. Oh! Yeah. Chris Sharma revolutionized climbing when I was in my 20s, right? He's roughly my age, I'm 43. He completely revolutionized climbing. He jumped grades that were established to 3, some will argue 4 grades higher than any human being had ever climbed before, and he made it look relatively easy. No guesses who this is. This is the current sort of replacement for him. His name is Adam Ondra. Now, if you look back at Chris Sharma, sort of beefcakey, massive dude with a huge wingspan, right? Climber. And then Adam Ondra. Someone took a giraffe, gave it fluffy hair, and took its shoulders away. And somehow these are the 2 greatest climbers in anyone's top 2 of greatest climbers that have ever lived. This is the 2 of them standing next to each other. It looks ridiculous.
On the same level?
I very much doubt that. But still, just look at the width of the one guy compared to the other. They're different species. They don't look like the same sports person. Yet you are looking at the 2 greatest climbers that have ever lived by quite a long way, right? Now, why is that? Because if you break down the basics of someone's body shape relative to climbing, if you look at someone's height, someone's weight, and someone's reach or their ape index, you'll find that each one has a pro and a con. If I'm taller than you are, that's lovely. I get to reach further than you. The problem is I weigh more than you, and I'm also working with longer mechanical levers, right? Now that's a fancy way of basically saying, if your hand is here and you lift a 5 kilogram weight, this muscle's doing very little work. But because my hand's here lifting the same 5 kilogram weight, it's doing more work. And if we put a long pole in my hand with a 5 kilogram weight on the end of it, you can imagine that would be even more difficult to lift, right? So for every centimeter that you are taller, that your limbs are longer, or that your legs are longer, in general, you give up something called longer levers. If you look at weight, it makes sense that the lighter you are, the stronger you be, right? And it's true, if you light, your muscles have to work less. But the problem is, if you're giving away weight in the form of muscle itself, you're losing power. So there's a gain and there's a loss based on whether or not you're heavier or lighter. Let's talk about reach specifically. So people with high ape indexes, great, so you can span bigger gaps. You don't have to jump as often as the person next to you. But again, you're working with longer levers. It requires more power in order to achieve the same move. So these three things give and take from each other in such a way that the truth is there just really isn't a particular body type. The only consistent finding in elite climbers is that obviously they have a very low fat percentage. They're not carrying around excess weight. That's it. And that's great news because you control it. That's something that you can change. You can't change whether or not you have a great ape index. You can't very easily change how strong you are. Right? It takes a lot of effort to do that, and you certainly can't change how tall you are. But you can change your body fat percentage in a month. So that's good news. The other myth that we looked at was finger strength. It's all about finger strength, right? Well, there's a downside to thinking that way, and I suffer from that. I don't know if any of you have climbed around me, but you'll notice that my hands are not this color. They are just white with tape, because I had long-term finger injuries from overdoing this when I was younger. And this is the injury that unfortunately you suffer from. That is a schematic of someone's skeleton. This over here is the little tendon that pulls on the tip of your finger, and these little round sheaths that tendon runs through is called annular pulleys, and you can rupture them and you have a bowstring injury, right? This is the most common thing that happens to climbers. So just working on your finger strength, making your finger strength higher and higher and higher, unfortunately doesn't work that well because of the injury risk. It's also just not true that it makes you a better climber. Who knows who that is? Oh! Yes, and his name is?
Tommy Caldwell.
Just everything's going to you, my friend. Tommy Caldwell. Broadly considered one of the top 5 climbers to have ever lived. A table saw injury cut off one of his fingers. And he sent everything that is the hardest things that he's ever sent after having his finger chopped off. And this is the style of climbing that he climbs. Very, very, very intense fingery stuff. Right? So how can it be that this man who literally lacks a finger that we have is so much stronger than we are? Well, we can all hang from small grips, right? If you've been climbing long enough, everyone can hang from a small grip. And if you've been climbing long enough, you can all do a pull-up. So why can't we all just campus everything? It's a legitimate question. We can all hang on small things. We can all do pull-ups. Why are we not campusing everything? Because finger strength isn't the only answer. The ability to apply finger strength to difficult body positions is called body tension. Who knows what that route is? Come on, chaps. Redeem yourselves here. No one? Fred Nicole did put it up, yes? Yeah. It's called Dreamtime. It's in Sayus, France. Flexibility matters. And specifically, I'm talking about hip flexibility, right? The ability to get your feet into very, very difficult positions and crank and use power out of those positions. And technique matters, that extra little 5% that you can use of the finger strength that you have. These things all come from stuff like technique. So in other words, the key findings are what to focus on if you want to increase your performance is not finger strength, and it's not stressing about the fact that you're short or tall. It's increasing your body tension or your ability to provide body tension with core strength, flexibility, technique, in other words, time on the wall and technical challenges, and reduce your body fat. That's it. That's how you become physically a stronger climber. But climbing has this other side to it, and this is the core of what we're going to talk about today. It has this whole other world to it that most sports have, but only in small quantities. And that is, it's a hyper-psychologically challenging sport. Would everyone agree with that? And that's ultimately what we're going to talk about today. Who wants a hamper? Come on.
Somewhere in England?
Yes, somewhere in England, close enough.
Yeah!
It's the Peak District. Come on, people. Okay. So the things I'm going to touch on are physical versus mental. Does head game actually make a difference in sport and exercise? And how can you change it? That's what we're here to talk about, is ultimately what would I advise that you do differently if you're not already doing it now? So this is probably JD's favorite saying. He pronounces it slightly differently. Okay. So in the world of sport and psychology linked into sport, awareness is something that a lot of people talk about, right? I need to be more aware of my headspace. Well, my sports psychology professor made a particular point here to me that has stuck with me for life, right? The first day of sports psychology at university in honours year, right? So these are all of us are interested in peak performance. We want to help pro athletes and amateur athletes who are very serious about their sport perform at super high levels. He gave us a book and he said, okay, cool. Top left-hand corner. Hello, sir.
I'm bad,
Come
I'm
in,
sorry.
bad person. This is Dave. He's going to do 4 laps because he was late. Okay. So first day, he sat us all down and he said, okay guys, top left-hand corner of this book, I want you to write down what percentage of your sport do you think is mental? And remember, this is a peak performance honours class at university, so I'm studying with a whole bunch of guys that play for Western Cape cricket and rugby and swim for South Africa and stuff like that. These are the guys sitting in my class, the people who you know as our kind of sports stars in South Africa. So they're all writing high percentages, 40s and 50s and 60%. Myself and a few guys were climbers, so we wrote very high percentages, 70%. Because ultimately, if you can't get off the ground with confidence, you can't climb, no matter how strong you are, right? And he said, great. So we all agree we should be here. Yes, prof. Yeah, no, we're all very interested. Yes. He said, great. Top right-hand corner, write down what percentage of your training you put into mental. And we all wrote 0. So that's a disparity. We're all terribly aware that we need to care about this. We don't do anything about it. So the father of modern psychology is C.G. Jung, and he said, you are what you do, not what you say you'll do. So you have to ask yourself, do you currently put any effort into the psychology of your sport? In any sport, not necessarily this one. Let's say you also love running or cricket or whatever you enjoy. Do you put any time into the psychology of that? Into the head game of it? And that's what I'm going to hope to achieve with you guys today, is not that you should be more aware of your head game. You should do something about it. And I'm going to show you what those things should be. The first really important thing to understand before I get prescriptive and say do this, do that, is this tension between physical and mental. I think most people believe, and well, they may not articulate it this well very often, but most people pretend as if they've got a body, and then they've got their sort of personality that sort of is sitting there in an abstract way and runs like software on their brain, right? Well, the truth is, you really have no idea which one you're experiencing in real life. Right? Whether or not something that you are doing or feeling or saying comes from a mental or physical origin. It's very difficult to distinguish or measure the difference, even in science, apart from the location. give you some examples. There's something called neuromuscular inhibition. If you don't believe that you can do something, your brain actively switches off neurons to muscles. Now, we believe that this is an evolutionary adaptation, the concept that, oh, I'm not going to make it to that gazelle that I'm chasing. I'm not going to injure myself by trying harder, I'll back off. The sort of cheetah that gives up a little bit earlier than you would have. Have you noticed that? In wildlife documentaries, they're kind of like, why don't you just sprint? You'll get. Just didn't feel like he had a good chance, and his muscles literally can't fire as strongly as they otherwise would if he believed he had a chance. And we work the same way, right? And people who have been able to switch this off have broken world records by profound distances all of a sudden. There was a British triple jumper, his name escapes me, who in one Olympics broke the world triple jump distance by like half a meter, not by a centimeter or a millimeter, 3 jumps in a row. And there are documented cases of women picking up cars, individual women picking up cars off their screaming babies after car accidents. Now, how are these people doing that? There is no way on the planet, any of us, if we took 4 of the strongest, burliest dudes in here and said, go and pick up my car, it's not going to happen. No matter how much money is underneath it. How is an individual woman doing that? Because interestingly, a lot of the neurons that fire to your muscles are inhibitory neurons, a lot of them. And the reason that you are strong one day and weak the next is less and more of these neurons firing. Now tell me, what part of that sounds psychological and what part of it sounds physical? It's just same, right? Your mind and your body use the same energy systems. In fact, fatigue in the one causes fatigue in the other. If I give you difficult math sums, you'll climb for 3 hours, you'll climb worse afterwards. If I give you climbing for 3 hours, you'll do poorer maths afterwards. These are facts. Physical pain causes mental pain and symptoms. Mental pain causes physical pain and illness. The placebo effect is a perfect example of where the line between mental and physical isn't just blurry, it's impossible to even draw. Right? Placebo effect most people view as you give someone a sugar tablet and their headache goes away. That's what most people think placebo effect is. It goes far beyond that. They've done research on people where they scratch them with capsicum powder, that's the hot, burny stuff in chili, in 4 places. And they give them a tube that says anti-inflammatory cream. It isn't, it's aqueous cream. And they give them a tube that says aqueous cream, and it is aqueous cream. So they've just given them 2 tubes that are actually just aqueous cream. And they rub aqueous cream on the one and they rub anti-inflammatory cream, a placebo, on the others, and the inflammation goes down in those swollen spots because someone believed that it would. In 40% of cases, that's roughly how often you see placebo effect taking place. What part of that's physical and what part of it's mental? And I'm harping on this, I'm stopping here for a moment, though this doesn't sound like climbing head game prescription, because it's very important to move forward and to trust me on some of the things that I'm going to say later as super important. You need to get this down to your toes, that your mind and your body are not separable in any way that matters. You can't measure it. You definitely don't know which one's at play. And even someone who's very trained in trying to figure that stuff out can't really do it that well. So don't view yourself as mental and physical. Just view yourself as self. No one's ever going to get that one. It's the most random, obscure place. Who wants to try? What country is that in?
England.
Well done, you get stuff. This is cheddar gorge, as in the cheese. Not joking. It's climbing where they came up with the idea of cheese. Okay. So does it matter? What difference does it make? Very much. Focusing on head game, training your head game in a sport makes a huge difference. And there's countless examples of people massively over and underachieving within sport. Tiger Woods is a perfect example. Tiger Woods was God's gift to golf, for those of you who don't know, until he had a very, very public and messy divorce. And then every camera was looking at him for a different reason. It was suddenly, he was controversial, he was shunned by the general community, you know, the golfing community didn't like what he had done, it was public, it was shameful, it was bad, and the dude suddenly couldn't hit a ball straight, overnight. Now, do you think anything fundamentally changed about the way that Tiger Woods swung a golf club? He went from the greatest man to ever swing a golf club to someone who frankly shouldn't have been on the PGA Tour. And it happened overnight because of his headspace. Andy Murray, for those of you who follow tennis, was for a very long time viewed as the best defensive tennis player on the planet. And the best defensive tennis players win all of the Grand Slam tournaments. But he didn't win one until very, very late in his career. And the reason is because he's got a terrible mental approach to the game. He's quite John McEnroe-ish, full of arguments with anyone who makes a bad line call or a referee or gets cross and shouts at himself and stuff like that. Very negative guy on the court. Right? The New Zealand rugby team. I'm 43. For most of my life, the New Zealand rugby team has been a different species. They are not comparable to other rugby teams. I've seen them in person. They trained at Stellenbosch University whenever they played the Springboks in Cape Town. So we got to see their private training sessions. 15 of them on a rugby field make a rugby field look small. They are not the same species as us. They are designed to kill people on a rugby field. They were destroying teams with cricket scores until it came to a World Cup semi-final or a final. And then they lost to teams that they should have been walking over. Why? Head game. Kelly Slater, who here serves? What can you tell me about Kelly Slater?
Insane.
He is entirely insane. Yes, yeah. He is the GOAT. How did he become the GOAT though? Because after 6 world championships, he has 11. He quit. But then this really brash, irritating Hawaiian dude called Andy Irons came onto the scene and won 3 world championships. And suddenly Kelly Slater was like, a competitor, a muse. I shall return and win the next 5 world championships. He needed a mental challenge, right? We also struggle with training. This happens to you and me all the time. Sometimes we're great at motivation and training, sometimes we're not. Sometimes we have bad sessions, sometimes we don't. It's head game. So how do you change it? The first step is just what I'm basically saying here, is don't ignore it, right? It's a real thing. It's not some abstract thing that you should be aware of. It's something that you should actively work towards changing. It has real effects on your body on a second-to-second, minute-to-minute basis. And in sports, it really does make you stronger or weaker, in fact, measurably. And the very best place to start is to listen to your own self-talk. Now, this is where it's going to sound like I'm talking to individuals here, and I'm not at all. But you will all have done something like this, where you're failing at a route and you start saying negative things, right? Now that we call self-talk. It even happens on the wall if you are particularly having a bad day. You start talking to the people around you, trying to make excuses as to why you're not going to achieve the next move. You've all either done this or you've witnessed it, and we refer to this as self-talk. What do you think your inhibition neurons are doing at a time like that? They're switching off muscles, literally making you weaker. So if your self-talk is negative, stop speaking. And we call this thought stopping. So it's a strategy by which people crush bad thoughts. They find themselves struggling to keep their head in the here and now. They're worried about something egotistical like, oh, what if I don't make this next move? What will the camera think? What will my friend think? Will they laugh at me? Am I going to lose face? Am I going to lose status in the gym because this person did it and I couldn't do it, and usually I climb stronger than them, right? When you start feeling yourself thinking like that, you need to use a thought-stopping tactic. And this is the fundamentally most important thing that you should implement into sport, is thought-stopping. You have to first of all recognize it. Sometimes that's difficult. And in a very non-combative way, you guys should develop a culture within your friend groups of pointing it out to each other. In a very kind of, hey, listen, your self-talk's a bit negative. Sort that out, you know? Just nicely with each other, right? Not in a chirpy kind of way, just point it out in a friendly way so that someone can realize it. Sometimes it's hard to see for yourself, okay? And you have to put a stop to it with a symbolic gesture. Now this comes across as incredibly cheesy, but it really works, right? Now that you know that this is a tactic, you'll see it all the time in professional sport. Do you really think that the guy who's about to go and do a gymnastics thing needs to put that amount of chalk on his hand? It's like ridiculous. Tennis players are hitting clay off the bottom of their shoes when they play on grass. Right? How many times does that guy need to touch his pads before he's ready for the next cricket ball? This is all thought-stopping gestures. Just forget the last ball, forget the last move, forget the last route, forget the last everything that went wrong. I'm here again. I'm ready for this moment. That was my stupid little thought-stopping gesture, right? You'll see people go crush, they'll throw stuff away, they'll touch helmets, they'll do all manner of things, and they'll do it repetitively over and over and over again, like there's something wrong with them. Like they've got a nervous twitch. Have you noticed this in pro sport? Right? This is thought-stopping gestures. These people have sessions with sports psychologists and they make them do thought-stopping gestures. Develop your own. I hate telling people this, but my super cheesy one when I was climbing something very high and it was super scary, is I would touch the rock to bring me back here, and I would say the word flow out loud. Now that's crazy cheesy, but it worked. It brought me back to here. I wasn't 30 meters off the ground, my arms weren't pumped anymore, I was feeling the texture of rock and hearing the word flow like someone else was saying it. Cheesy as it is, it works. Develop a thought-stopping gesture, something symbolic, something that makes sense to you. And then, critical second step, you have to replace it with a positive thought. Now my little positive thought was flow, but this is where cheesy positive mantras are a great starting point. Firstly, they're distracting. Secondly, usually they're funny. And ultimately, the truth is they work. This is one from Bruce Lee. Do not pray for an easy life. Pray for the strength to endure difficulty. Crazy cheesy, but if you're into martial arts, this stuff speaks to you on a deep level, right? I love that. That's so ridiculous. Sweat is fat cry. Eh? Just the worst stuff. Some American came up with that surely. And my personal favorite, this one like really puts a lump in my throat, truly it does, is be the guy your dog thinks you are. Because I have a golden retriever and he's my very firstborn child. And that's the kind of stuff we're talking about here, right? So why use them? At work, if nothing else, it's self-distraction. It's self-distraction from returning to that negative thought pattern that you were in. I can't do this move, or it's really difficult, or I'm not tall enough, or this is going to be embarrassing if I don't flash it, or whatever. Right? You want to get away from that way of thinking. Music is a very, very good thing in this space. It is something else, like a cheesy positive mantra, to replace a negative thought with. So for me, there's certain songs that I climb really, really well to, right? Not because music is involved in climbing or that there's any kind of beat involved in the way that you move, but there's just something about it that raises the hair on the back of my neck, and I just feel more motivated to climb. In this space, I'll tell you a story. That man and I over there have done stupid long distance things together, many of them, all his fault. Some of them are the Transbavians, which is the longest you can cycle in one day off-road in the world. It's about 230 kilometers. And the reason I'm telling you this story is because I learnt in 1 second how susceptible I am to this kind of stuff. I studied this, I preach these things. Surely I would be sort of above it. I understand it too well for it to work on me, right? Well, turns out, after cycling for 12 hours, every single part of you hurts, right? I mean, your earlobes hurt. Never mind your bum or your hands or your legs. Those are long gone, right? They'll never be the same again. But the back of your eyeballs hurt. It's been dark for several hours. You've run out of glycogen hours ago. You can't think. You can't hold conversation anymore. Your brain doesn't have glucose available. And some cute little coloured chap who's the son, 5-year-old little boy of a farm labourer, has come out of his house to watch the cyclist come past in the dark and goes, "Ho, Biana, ho! Ho, Biana, ho!" as we go past. And I just got out of the saddle and went, and just sprinted up the hill. Mm-hmm. Now, why is that working on me? Because this stuff works. We're susceptible to it. Lean into it. Don't be embarrassed by it. Let it happen. If music works for you, let it happen. If a particular friend or a cheesy line speaks to you deeply, let it happen. It's a positive thing. It keeps you away from a negative headspace. Add people. This is very common practice in training for a reason. It works very well, right? People generally create positive spaces together. I love the fact that you guys usually all train together. There's a good energy with a bunch of you, right? It's good for all of your mental head spaces. You train well together. The three of you are usually a group, right? That train together. It's a good headspace for you guys to train together. It's nice to see it in that way. Try not to climb in solo groups. Or solo groups. Try not to climb solo. Try to climb with people. Right? And by the way, research confirms that. In successful people, they involve other people in their training. Sorry?
I said you can't win again.
Yeah, you can't win again, you've already said. There is one left. What can I ask? In fact, there's two left. Oh! You can go back. Where's that?
Green for Rocklands.
It's not Rocklands. It's way too green for Rocklands. So it's in the country of... You can't win anything again. Guess.
Start naming country. Spain.
No. Yes. And it is the Peak District. Terrible giveaway. And last one, except the person who already recognized this. Where's that?
Is that the first one?
It's not, it's Greek, yeah. What's the It starts with a K, it does, yes. K. Not even close. But just for trying, you get the hamper. It's killing us. Well done, buddy. It's killing us. Grande grotto. Shelling is an island called Kalimba, just adjacent to the island of Kos. Okay. The last thing to talk about is visualization. Almost done, guys. So what is visualization? Visualization is you basically imagining the thing ahead of you. So you'll see this if you watch the Olympics, you'll watch bobsled pilots imagine the course ahead of them, right, as if they are having a sort of a dream state experience. If you watch pro climbing, you'll see people close their eyes and imagine the route ahead of them, right? Physically imagining it. When I say physically imagining it, they're going through the moves physically with their hands and with their feet. Now, why is that? Well, it's because imagining is a very, very close replica to the real thing for your brain. When they realized this, they started putting people through imagination training. So they got golfers to imagine their perfect swing over and over and over again. And then they were swinging smoother, measurably, as a result of those practice sessions. Then they started putting video of those people in front of themselves in isolation tanks and watching themselves swing perfectly over and over and over again, and it literally counted as practice. You strengthen the neural pathways of any movement by imagining that movement. This is a physical pathway in your brain that more neurons join onto, and you strengthen that pathway by imagining it, right? It's quite difficult to do. It takes practice. You'll constantly be drawn away from it by distractions. It's very important to add as much detail as you possibly can. So in other words, add senses, add what it feels like, add the temperature and the sound of music in the background. Add as much into your imagination as you can. And do it always as a positive experience. In other words, you must always be successful in this imagination. You must always make it to the top. You must always send the route. You must always hit the ball for 6. You must always hit the golf ball dead straight down the fairway. Now, even that is quite difficult to do. At first, your imagination will act poorly. It will misbehave, and you'll imagine falling by mistake without meaning to. So this takes practice, right? This is one of those things that you can literally practice at home in 10 minutes when you're waiting for the microwave or whatever. It's easy to do in those little short moments. Now, there are dedicated ways that you can spend time doing this. One of the best ways for us, which we all have access to, is just 10 minutes in the morning before you get out of bed. Nice, calm, quiet, usually dark in winter, peaceful. It's a good time to do this imagination training or visualization. And in professional sport, like I said, they put people in isolation tanks, sensory deprivation tanks. So what that guy's lying in is water that is extremely salty, so salty that no further salt will dissolve into it. So you float. This is actually quite a bad solution that he's sunk so low. Usually you float on it almost the way you would imagine a balloon floating on the water. You just about touch the water. It's quite a ridiculously weird experience. They make the water body temperature so that, yes, just salt, so salty that you float incredibly high. It's to make you float. To make you crazy floaty. That's the point of all of the salt. Never touch your eye when you're in one of these tanks. Bad. Right? They make the water body temperature, and they do that so that you have no experience of the water being a different temperature. They make it dark in there. They close the lid, and it's the best 10-minute nap you've ever had in your life. But what they'll do from a sports perspective is they'll get people to imagine their sports behavior, their visualization in that setting. So learn from this. This is what pros will do. In other words, doing this waiting for the microwave is a good idea. Doing it lying in bed with nothing distracting you is a great idea. Do it when you can really reduce the amount of sensory irritation to this process. This is one of the most positive things you can do. So step 1, everything we've spoken about up to that point is thought stopping, getting out of a bad headspace and into a good one. And this is practice when you're not even there. You have a question? Yes, I have, yeah. Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah. It's thoroughly enjoyable. Yeah. Have you?
No,
Yeah, now I don't know if one's locally available. I haven't seen one in Port Elizabeth, but where was I? I think I was in the UK when I went to one, and I've only done it once, so it was difficult to use the time well because it was a novelty to me. I was just amazed by everything that was going on. But you can very quickly see that if you have access to something like that, how it would be a great place for you to calm your thoughts, focus on what you wanted to focus on.